She killed her first man to save the monster protecting her. Eleanor was shaking on the basement floor, Dante's blood on her hands, and a shotgun aimed at his chest. The waitress from Queens should have frozen. Instead, she remembered his voice from the firing range. Breathe, hold, squeeze. One shot later, the assassin dropped. Dante looked at her like he was seeing her for the first time, because the frightened girl was gone. Sofia Caterina Moretti had finally woken up. Let us hit pause and open the case file on Alejandro Moretti. You and I are going to unpack the exact moment a human mind shatters its own defenses. Under the dim lighting of a 5-star restaurant, blood and marinara sauce share the same visual thickness. Moretti ruled the New York underworld through absolute terror, fearing nothing but his elderly grandmother. This dinner was supposed to celebrate a violent takeover, but it triggered a catastrophic psychological collapse instead. A waitress, a silver necklace, slipping from her uniform, and suddenly the ruthless matriarch of this crime family is on the floor, pulling a stranger into her arms. The simple truth we all must learn. No amount of armor protects you from your own buried trauma. In behavioral profiling, the environment tells the whole story. The Manhattan rain that night did not just fall, it spat from the sky, perfectly mirroring the chronic stress of Elena and her daily existence. At 24, she exhibited classic survival mode exhaustion. She was drowning under past-due medical bills for a deceased foster sister, carrying the weight of a city designed to break the vulnerable. She pulled her worn coat tighter, splashing through oily puddles toward the service entrance of Lado. This restaurant was a sanctuary where Wall Street predators and underworld figures paid exorbitant premiums for the illusion of safety. Suddenly, her reality was shattered by a sharp, barking voice. "You are late, Harding. Stick with me here." This is exactly where we see how anxiety in a criminal hierarchy trickles down to the working class. Richard, the floor manager, snapped the second she breached those steel doors. His face was flushed, panicked sweat, coating his forehead in a clear fear response. 3 minutes, Richard. The subway stalled at 59th Street. She breathed out, stripping off her damp coat. "I do not care if the river flooded the tunnels. Tonight is not the night," Richard hissed, his fingers trembling against his silk tie. "Table 1 is booked." The kitchen staff, usually a chaotic symphony of clanking pots, was operating in a state of suppressed panic. The very air in the room felt heavily charged, with an electric current of absolute dread. Elena slipped into her white blouse and tailored vest, her fine motor skills compromised by adrenaline as she fumbled with the buttons. "Table 1, the investors from Dubai?" she asked, securing her apron. "Worse," Richard whispered, his pupils dilated as he glanced toward the dining room doors. "The Moretti family, specifically Alejandro and his grandmother. When they call, we clear the floor." Elena felt her blood run entirely cold. Even to a civilian isolated in poverty, that name carried the weight of an apex predator. Alejandro was not simply a mob boss. He was a ruthless executioner draped in a custom suit. He inherited the syndicate at 22, right after his father was violently gunned down. The brutal lesson here is that power always comes with a bloody price tag. In the 6 years since taking the throne, Alejandro engineered a bloodbath across the seaboard. He consolidated his territory with a psychopathic brilliance. He was a phantom, effectively a modern monster. And tonight, Elena was assigned to his table. "Why me?" she asked, her vocal cords tightening with terror. "Give it to Jessica. She handles the VIPs." Jessica called in sick, likely because her own survival instincts kicked in, Richard noted, shoving a polishing cloth into her hands. "Here is the protocol. You remain quiet. You avoid direct eye contact. You pour the wine and vanish. If you spill a single drop, I will not fire you, 'cause his enforcers will violently bury you under the meadowlands before I even get the chance." "Understood." She swallowed hard, nodding in submission. "Watch this carefully." Under extreme stress, the mind instinctively reaches for anchors. Her fingers brushed against the cold metal concealed beneath her blouse. It was a self-soothing compulsion. That necklace was her only possession of emotional currency, a heavy, silver locket, shaped like a weeping willow tree, branches tangled around a fractured blue diamond. The orphanage documented she wore it the night she was abandoned 22 years ago. It served as her only tether to an identity she never comprehended. It is a stark reminder that we all desperately search for our origins. Outside the restaurant, 3 black bulletproof SUVs abruptly dominated the wet curb. The predators had officially arrived. The valet wisely exhibited severe avoidance behavior. Instead, 4 enforcers with the mass of defensive linemen stepped into the rain, scanning the perimeter with hyper-vigilant lethality. From the center vehicle emerged the clinical definition of a narcissist, Alejandro Moretti. He presented as a man carved from marble, standing over 6 feet tall in a bespoke suit. His predatory amber eyes were his true weapon, designed to strip away cognitive defenses with a single glance. But then, a fascinating shift occurred. His violent aura dissolved for exactly 3 seconds. He extended a heavily scarred hand, gently helping a frail, elderly woman step onto the wet pavement. It just shows you that even the absolute most ruthless monsters in the world have someone they bow to. You and I need to pay close attention to Isabella Moretti. She commanded absolute psychological dominance over the syndicate. She wore a black velvet coat and ancient pearls, her face mapped by decades of chronic traumatic stress. She buried a husband, 2 sons, and suffered the haunting loss of her youngest daughter, Katerina, who vanished without a trace during the Mafia wars. "Keep close, Nona," Alejandro murmured, his gravelly tone cutting the rain. 2 enforcers flanked them. As they breached the golden doors of Lido, the ambient noise of the room instantly flatlined. The apex predators had entered the enclosure, and the wealthy elite suddenly remembered their own mortal vulnerability. The hard truth is, all the money in the world means nothing when death walks in. Elelenina remained frozen at the station, experiencing a severe tachycardia response as her heart hammered against her ribs. She watched Alejandro methodically guide his grandmother to the isolated velvet alcove. It was a textbook display of spatial dominance, positioning himself as a dark king upon a temporary throne. Richard materialized beside her, forcing a silver tray with 2 flutes of champagne into her rigid hands. "Go," he commanded softly, "and God help you." To her compromised nervous system, the walk toward Table 1 felt indistinguishable from a march to the executioner's block. She fixated entirely on the crystal stems, terrified her hand tremors would shatter them. With every single step into his orbit, the ambient temperature seemed to plummet. Fear has a funny way of freezing the air in your lungs. 2 enforcers men exhibiting the flat affect and blunt trauma scars of seasoned sociopaths immediately obstructed her path. "Let her pass, Leo," Alejandro's voice projected. It was smooth, yet saturated with an authority that demanded immediate compliance. The guards stepped aside in perfect synchronicity. Elelenina breached the alcove, assaulted by distinct olfactory triggers. She smelled expensive cedarwood, layered over the faint, metallic tang of ozone, the undeniable scent of impending violence. "Good evening," she said softly, exhibiting submission by pinning her gaze to the white tablecloth. "May I offer our complimentary vintage to start?" Alejandro deployed a tactical silence. She felt the oppressive weight of his amber eyes scanning her, a gaze entirely devoid of sexual interest. This was something much colder. This was a clinical threat assessment. He was analyzing her respiratory rate and the microtremors in her extremities, categorizing her as a threat or a civilian. "Pour," he finally commanded. Elelenina stepped forward, carefully angling her body to serve Isabella first. The matriarch was exhibiting signs of profound dissociation, staring blankly into the flickering candle, her mind lost to the ghosts of a violent past. "It is a beautiful night, Nona," Alejandro stated, attempting to ground her psychologically. "We secured the docks. The Russians are out. You do not have to worry." Isabella emitted a frail sigh. "Territory, blood, money. It does not bring back what is gone, Alessandro. It does not fill the empty chairs at the Sunday table." The saddest irony of life is that we sacrifice our souls for things we cannot take with us. For a microsecond, a genuine expression of unresolved grief fractured his hardened features before he re-established his impenetrable mask. I know, Nona, but it keeps us breathing. It is a grim truth we all face. Survival often requires suppressing our deepest wounds. Elelenina repositioned herself to fill his glass. She was deep within his personal space, close enough to see the jagged scar bisecting his left eyebrow. Proximity to this violent figure was paralyzing to her nervous system. The chilled champagne bottle felt dangerously slick in her damp palms. She leaned awkwardly to avoid physical contact with his broad shoulder. Under the accumulated physical strain, the top button of her worn, cheaply made blouse finally snapped, dropping silently to the carpet. The dominoes of fate were in motion, and there was no going back. Let's hit pause for a second, guys, because this right here is where the entire universe flips upside down for these characters. Just a tiny slip of cheap fabric, and gravity does the rest. Out swings this antique silver weeping willow locket, with a busted blue diamond, catching the candlelight like a beacon. Elelenina gasps, pure panic washing over her face, as she shoves the cold metal back under her shirt. She whispers an apology, bracing herself to get screamed at or dragged out by security. But Alessandro, this famously volatile kingpin, just freezes. He doesn't yell at all. It is funny, isn't it? We spend our whole lives trying to hide our deepest vulnerabilities, but life always finds a way to expose them through the smallest accidents. Look at Alessandro's face. The guy is a ruthless boss who controls the city, but right now, his eyes are locked onto that waitress, like a predator who just spotted a ghost. But he is not the one who stops the room cold. It is Isabella. The untouchable matriarch sees that silver locket, and decades of buried grief just explode. A champagne glass slips right out of her trembling hands, shattering against the marble table. Expensive golden liquid bleeds into the white tablecloth, dripping onto the floor while the whole restaurant goes dead silent. You can build an empire of money and fear, but the truth is, no matter how much power or control you think you have in this world, unhealed trauma will always find a way to break right through the surface. Check out the background extras here. The bodyguards instantly reach into their suits, ripidichodes, gripping their guns, completely convinced someone just took a shot at the boss. Alessandro is out of his chair in a split second, scraping the wood hard against the floor. He ignores the waitress completely, hovering over his grandmother like a human shield, and screaming to lock the doors. But Isabella is not under attack. She is suffocating on a terrifying, agonizing kind of hope. She starts hyperventilating, raising one trembling, manicured finger to point straight at the terrified girl. It is a harsh reminder for all of us we react to the pain we expect to feel, totally blind to the miracles standing right in front of our faces. You and I have all felt that pure, blinding panic before, right? Elelenina has a million alarm bells going off in her head, screaming at her to run out the kitchen doors. But her feet are literally glued to the floor. Isabella chokes out a demand about the necklace, and suddenly, the old woman just sminkingst. It is this raw, guttural sound that actually makes her hardened mobster grandson flinch. The entire upscale dining room just flatlines. The musicians stop playing. Rich people freeze with their forks in the air. Elelenina tries to back away but bumps right into a massive armed bodyguard. It goes to show how fear really works in real life. When the moment comes to run, panic doesn't give you wings. It turns your legs to stone. The guard clamps a heavy hand down on her shoulder, trapping her on the spot. Alessandro slowly turns his head, and you can practically see the flip switch in his brain. The worried grandson is gone, replaced by a cold-blooded killer. He's right up to her, invading her space, towering over her like a dark cloud. You heard her, he says, his voice so quiet it is actually terrifying. Take it out. Elelenina is shaking so hard, she can barely grab her own shirt. She is crying now, entirely convinced these mobsters think she stole from them, and she knows exactly what happens to thieves in this city. It is a brutal truth of human nature. We always assume the absolute worst is about to happen, punishing ourselves before the gavel even drops. Watch how desperately she tries to talk her way out of a grave she didn't even dig. She swears she didn't steal it, crying that she has had it since she was a baby. Alessandro does not care at all. He just repeats the order, stone cold. Shaking like a leaf, she pulls the heavy silver chain over her head and holds the weeping willow locket out in her bare hand. The cracked blue diamond shines under the lights, looking almost as sad as she does. Then, Isabella just stumbles forward, violently slapping away her grandson. When he tries to catch her, she grabs Elena by the hand, her old fingers locking on like a vice. It's crazy how true it is. When someone is starving for just a drop of hope, they will hold on to you tight enough to leave bruises. Isabella stares down at the silver branches and the broken stone, and you can literally see her heart shatter all over again. A scream rips out of her throat, this horrible, gut-wrenching mix of absolute grief and wild joy. It is so loud and raw that even Alessandro flinches. It is the sound of a mother waking up from a 20-year nightmare. Before poor Elena can even process what is happening, this 80-year-old crime boss throws her arms around her neck and just starts sobbing into her cheap uniform. She is holding on like the girl is a ghost that might float away. Honestly, it teaches you something heavy. Time does not heal a broken heart at all. It just forces you to wear a mask until something comes along to rip it off. "My little bird, you came back," the old woman sobs. Elena is completely frozen, her arms just hovering awkwardly in the air while this terrifying syndicate queen cries on her shoulder. When she tries to say she has the wrong person, Isabella just refuses to hear it. She grabs the girl's face, staring hard into her green eyes, tracing the shape of her jaw, and right then, the truth hits Alessandro like a freight train. Caterina, his aunt, the rebel who ran off with a rival 24 years ago and got murdered for it. Her baby went missing, leaving a hole in the family that they filled with blood and violence. It is a crazy reminder that you can bury your past as deep as you want, but the universe always finds a way to dig it back up. Everyone thought that baby died in the cartel ambush. Watch Alessandro completely lose his cool here. His heart is pounding out of his chest, so he falls back on the only thing he knows: aggression. He grabs Elena by the wrist, snatching the locket to see for himself. He flips the silver pendant over, and there it is. Engraved right into the metal is their dark family motto: family above all, right above his dead aunt's exact birth date. These pieces were custom-made for the bloodline. Only 4 exist in the entire world, and the math is not lying to him anymore. Sometimes we spend our lives searching for our purpose, completely unaware that our true identity was already carved in stone before we even took our very first breath. That 4th locket had been a ghost for over 20 years. Alessandro looks up, and his amber eyes lock onto this trembling waitress with a terrifying intensity. In his mind, she is not just a girl anymore. She is a massive glitch in his perfectly controlled world. "Where did you get this?" he demands, his voice dropping so low it rattles the floorboards. Between the screaming and his crushing grip on her wrist, Elena completely breaks down. She sobs that she was just dumped at an orphanage in Chicago with nothing but the necklace. Instantly, Isabella pulls the girl tight against her chest, turning on her grandson like a protective lioness. It proves that a mother's instinct to protect her own will always overpower any fear of the consequences. "Can you not see she is terrified? She is your cousin." Isabella snaps at him, crying all over the poor girl's uniform. The tension in the restaurant is so insanely thick that the manager actually passed out cold behind the hostess stand. Alessandro just stares at this sobbing girl, wrapped in his grandmother's arms. The long-lost Mafia princess, spending her life pouring cheap drinks for tips. And right here, you can see a dark, possessive switch flip in the kingpin's head. He knows that if the rival families find out she survived, they will hunt her down by sunset. It is a tragic irony, about human relationships. Sometimes the people who are the most desperate to keep you safe are the exact same ones who end up locking you inside a cage. Let's watch exactly how a mafia boss locks down a crisis together. Alessandro turns to his men with cold, pure fury. He orders the entire restaurant cleared, takes everyone's phones, and cuts the security cameras. The unspoken threat of violence makes sure nobody argues. He slowly adjusts his cuffs, trying to hide the fact that his mind is spinning out of control, planning street wars and DNA tests. "Cancel my meetings," he whispers, never taking his eyes off the traumatized waitress. Just like that, they throw her into a black SUV and drive her away into a completely unknown world. You and I know how fast things can turn, but this is the ultimate lesson your entire life. Everything you think you know can be erased and rewritten in a single afternoon. Let's hit pause and look at this setup. Elelenina sits totally frozen in the back of a massive armored SUV, listening to rain smash against bulletproof glass. The normal world where she's stressed over rent is literally fading in the rearview mirror. Beside her, the old woman Isabella holds her hand in a death grip, rubbing the girl's knuckles to keep herself from falling apart, whispering prayers to a silver locket. Up front, Alessandro sits like a dark shadow of pure violence. It makes you realize how fast everyday life can vanish. The lesson is hard but true. Sense of safety is a fragile illusion. It shatters the second someone, with enough power, decides to take the wheel. And all you can do is hold on for dear life. The glow of an encrypted phone lights up Alessandro's face as he dictates who lives and who dies. He carries the crushing weight of a syndicate war, staying totally quiet. Elelenina feels the heavy weight of his focus and desperately asks where they're going. She begs him to remember her upcoming work shift. It's that tragic human instinct to cling to routine. Alessandro can't afford sentiment. He coldly tears her reality apart, telling her the home is compromised and she's a target. No shift tomorrow. The bitter life lesson here is clear. We hold on to the boring details of our routines the hardest right as they slip away. We think we control our destiny, but control is just a comforting story we tell ourselves to feel safe. You and I have probably watched thrillers, where the bad guy tries to play the hero, but seeing it like this is deeply unsettling. Eleanor is suffocating on pure panic. Meanwhile, Alessandro flips the script. He spins this kidnapping not as a crime, but as a heroic rescue. He claims a rival mob is sending a literal army to kill her. It's manipulation at its finest. The SUV plunges deep into the dark woods, pulling up to a massive, isolated stone wall that feels like a tomb. The heartbreaking lesson here is about trust and deception. The most dangerous people in your life will rarely show up holding a weapon. Instead, they'll show up offering you a heavy shield, completely trapping you while demanding your endless gratitude. Just look at the insane level of intimidation happening here. Heavily armed guards lower their rifles the second they see Alessandro, treating him like a god. Massive iron gates grind open, swallowing Eleanor into a dark stone fortress over the Hudson River. Cameras track every inch of the grounds, and the guards pace around like caged animals. The SUV finally stops, and the heavy doors open to reveal the absolute worst part of this nightmare. A man stands alone at the top of the marble steps. If Alessandro is the brain behind this cruel empire, this new guy is the bloody hammer. The lesson is that wealth often hides the darkest realities. A cage built out of imported stone and expensive iron is still a cage that will crush your spirit. Let's look at this enforcer, Dante Corvino. He's a walking nightmare in a tailored suit, built for violence, with a nasty scar cutting down his face. But his dead, pale gray eyes are what freeze your blood. He stares at Eleanor with the absolute emptiness of a predator doing math. Alessandro barks a question about security. Dante calmly confirms the thermal sensors are live, his deep voice sending a visible shiver down Eleanor's spine. This is the exact second it hits her. She's truly trapped. It teaches us a grim truth about human intuition. When your gut screams that someone is hollow inside, you have to listen. Your body always recognizes a monster, long before your terrified mind is willing to accept the hard reality of the situation. Watch how these broken men silently fight over her. Dante shifts his dead stare to Eleanor, taking in her shaking shoulders. As a man molded purely by violence, he feels zero pity, calling her a stray to strip away her humanity. But Alessandro steps right in front of her, blocking Dante's view in a desperate power move. He claims her as his blood, terrified of losing what little family he has left. Dante just clenches his jaw, his face masking his own deep isolation, before locking his eyes back on the girl. This reveals a deeply tragic lesson. When toxic people fight over you, they're really just fighting their own inner demons. You're nothing more than a prize to be won, and you always end up paying the price for their massive egos. The massive doors slam shut behind her, echoing like a vault. Sure, the place is covered in imported marble, but Eleanor knows exactly what this is. It's a beautiful, high-tech cage. They march her down a quiet hallway straight into a hidden medical room. Waiting there is Dr. Gable, a corrupt professional who traded his ethics for mob money. He stands ready with sterile needles and swabs. It's brilliant and sickening. Forcing someone into a clinical setting strips away their fight and makes the madness feel completely official. It's a harsh lesson in how easily authority can be weaponized against us. I crossed the street, grabbed his shirt. Just because someone wears a white coat doesn't mean they're safe. Sometimes the professionals are the ones helping lock you away. Alessandro barks a single word, pointing her to a leather medical chair. Eleanor is terrified, her eyes desperately hunting for an escape. But Dante is already blocking the locked door, watching her like a lion watches a trapped deer. Just feeling his stare makes her skin burn with panic. She tries to fight back, swearing she'll never be part of their twisted family. Dante's cold voice suddenly cuts through the room. He tells her the sickening truth biology, doesn't ask for consent. Then he pushes off the door and slowly walks toward her. The life lesson here is brutal. We want to believe that simply saying no is enough to protect us. But boundaries mean absolutely nothing to someone who holds all the physical power in the room. Stick with me, because this is exactly how a trauma bond gets hardwired. Dante plays the ultimate fear card, warning that outside hitmen are coming for her anyway. He frames them not as kidnappers, but as a protective pack. And the crazy part? It works. Staring at this terrifying enforcer, her racing heart actually calms down. Exhausted, she submits to the needle. Dante steps into her personal space. He offers no warmth, but his massive size suddenly feels like a shield against the world. It's a chilling lesson about human nature. When pushed to the absolute edge of terror, our desperate minds will twist reality to survive. We'll convince ourselves that the very monster holding our leash is actually our only true savior. Outside, a violent storm rips the sky apart, matching the chaos in Eleanor's head. She wakes up buried in a huge bed, with thick curtains blocking the world. For a second, her brain tries to protect her, whispering it was all a bad nightmare. That lie shatters when she spots her cheap work uniform, folded next to a mountain of insanely expensive new clothes. They're burying her in luxury to force her dependence. A sudden knock makes her jump, and Isabella walks in uninvited, looking 10 years younger. The life lesson here is simple. Luxurious gifts are often just velvet handcuffs. When someone showers you with unearned wealth while cutting you off from your real life rake, they're never being generous. They're just buying your soul. All the sad, fragile energy Isabella had in the car is completely gone. Now she's buzzing with a manic vibe, desperate to reclaim the family she lost decades ago. She smiles and calls the girl Sophia. Eleanor tries to fight back, pulling the blankets up like a shield to protect her identity. But Isabella, blinded by her own tragic grief, steamrolls right over her. She invades Eleanor's space, petting her hair with a suffocating warmth that's really just pure dominance. Then she drops the heavy bomb. The DNA test is a 99.9% match. It's cold science wrapping around Eleanor's throat. The tragic lesson here is that the truth doesn't always set you free. Sometimes, facts are the weapons used to break you. The test results destroy any fantasy Eleanor had, about this being a mistake. She's forced to accept she belongs to a bloodline of literal monsters. Panic hijacks her brain. She scrambles backward, crying and begging to go back to her normal life. But Isabella's face turns to stone. She calmly explains that Alessandro's men have already wiped her completely off the map. Her apartment is gone. Even her little pet was packed up and fed fancy salmon somewhere else. Her old life simply doesn't exist anymore. It's a terrifying lesson about human identity. We think our daily routines anchor us to the world, but the dark truth is, someone with enough money and cruel intentions can erase your entire history, leaving you as a living ghost. Let us hit pause right here, because this scene is an absolute masterclass in power dynamics. Eleanor is completely falling apart on screen, screaming her lungs out because the life she knew is officially dead and gone. Then, bam, the heavy oak door practically flies off its hinges, and in walks Dante. No yelling, no dramatic speeches. Just cold, dead gray eyes scanning the chaos, his sleeves rolled up to show off his ink, and a Glock 19 sitting right there on his hip. He tells her to quiet down, barely above a whisper, and the whole room just freezes. It is wild how a true apex predator does not even need to raise his voice to suck the air out of a room. Sometimes in life, the quietest people in the room are the ones you need to watch out for the most. Watch the matriarch back out of the room. She uses Eleanor's new, forced name, a slick little psychological knife twist, and gives her exactly 20 minutes to fall in line. The door clicks shut. Now it is just the two of them in this suffocating silence. Dante pulls the classic Stonewall move. He just stands there, perfectly still, watching her back away until her spine slams into the heavy mahogany desk. She is hyperventilating, trying to play tough, telling him she is not a prisoner. And Dante? He just coldly corrects her, letting her know she is nothing but a walking hazard to his operation. He steps right into her space, a towering wall of muscle blocking out the light. It reminds you that freedom is fragile, and control can be stripped away in a single heartbeat. You and I are going to unpack this together, because the irony here is just painfully thick. Sometimes, survival means finding safety in the exact monster that is hunting you. Dante has her pinned against the wall, smelling like gun oil and bad intentions. He drops his voice into that hypnotic, lethal register, asking about last night, while his pale eyes actually track the frantic pulse in her neck. He lays it out for her plain and simple. Some poor kid at the restaurant snapped a picture of the panic and sent it straight to the rival Greco family. Dante is methodically tearing down her denial, forcing her to realize that, just by breathing, she is bringing a war to their doorstep. The saddest truth in life is that, sometimes, you become the collateral damage in someone else's war. Look at Eleanor's face right in this frame. Every drop of color just vanishes the second the Greco family gets mentioned. Dante leans in, voice completely hollow, and drops the hammer. Those are the exact same guys who butchered her mother. He tells her, the Grecos know a girl with the Moretti locket is out there, and she has maybe 48 hours before they put a name to her face. You can see her brain short-circuit as she begs to run away to Europe. But here is the twisted part. Dante does not yell or grab her. Instead, his calloused fingers gently brush against her jawline. It is this bizarrely tender touch in the middle of a nightmare, and you can see it hot-wire her nervous system. It shows us how deeply we crave human connection, even when it comes from the hand holding the knife. This shot is incredibly uncomfortable, but you cannot look away. Dante hovers right by her ear, casually explaining that her head is just a trophy to the Grecos. And to her uncle Alejandro, she is merely a shiny chess piece. Then he traces her lower lip, and that possessive stare just melts her knees. It is biological submission to the man holding the keys. He tells her she is his assignment now, promising to hunt her down if she ever runs. But watch how he spins this toxic cage as a protective shield. He convinces her she will be dead in a week, without his shadow. It is a harsh life lesson in how easily a villain can play the hero, simply by convincing you that the outside world is full of much worse monsters. Eleanor is stuck in the most dangerous trap, a human mind can build. She is staring at the mob enforcer keeping her hostage, but her terrified brain is already slapping a superhero cape on his shoulders. The sheer danger rolling off him has become an addictive drug for her shattered nerves. Then, he just snaps back to business. The intimacy vanishes into thin air, and he coldly orders her to get dressed for Alejandro's war council. 20 minutes later, she is walking down this massive marble staircase in black cashmere and dark denim. And right there, exactly one step behind her, is Dante. It proves that the heaviest chains we wear are often the ones we cannot even see. He is the walking, breathing reminder that her old life is permanently buried. See that silver locket resting against her dark sweater? That is not just jewelry. That is a loaded gun pointed straight at the past. They walk through these heavy double doors into Alejandro's private study, and the air just screams old money, cigar smoke, and brutal patriarchy. Alejandro is standing over a map of the 5 boroughs, like a king plotting a siege, surrounded by 4 syndicate captains who look ready to snap necks. The second Eleanor walks in, a dead silence drops over the room. These killers stare at her, their eyes zeroing in on the weeping willow locket and her cheekbones. She is the spitting image of Katerina. It is a stark reminder that we can never truly outrun our family history. Our bloodlines always find a way to drag us back into the dark. Alejandro locks those terrifying amber eyes on her, and you can practically see the pure, toxic pride radiating off him. He does not see a scared young woman. He sees a mirror reflecting his own massive ego. His gravelly voice booms through the room as he officially crowns her Sofia Caterina Moretti, the true heir to the Western docks. The mob captains immediately start shifting in their expensive suits. One big guy with a gold chain digging into his neck speaks up, warning everyone that the Greco family is already moving out. And just like that, the horror gets cranked up to 11. Lorenzo Greco just dropped a $5 million bounty on her head. Sometimes life forces you into a high-stakes game where you never even asked to hold a single card. Let us pause right here, you and I, and try to digest this nightmare. The rival syndicate wants to finish the bloodbath they started 20 years ago. $5 million, alive. You can physically see Eleanor fighting the urge to throw up, because she knows what a mob boss does to a living trophy. But Alejandro? He slams his fist onto the desk, so hard the whole room flinches. This madman breaks into a psychotic, terrifying smile. He actually wants the war. He invites the assassins to come, promising a river of blood before anyone touches her. He grabs her shoulders with an iron grip, demanding she harden her heart and embrace the Moretti name. It is a brutal lesson that in a world governed by absolute monsters, your only real shield is to become one yourself. Alejandro orders her to stop fearing the dark and start weaponizing it. Right there, in that exact frame, the innocent girl from Queens officially dies. Over the next 2 weeks, we watch her mind get completely dismantled and rebuilt inside this suffocating, luxurious alpine mansion. Alejandro runs the playbook of a perfect tyrant, cutting her off from the entire world. The estate is locked down tight by a vicious Sicilian security crew who value blood loyalty over cold, hard cash. She is essentially buried alive in silk and marble. She cannot even walk near a window, and they tossed her phone into the fireplace on night 1. It reminds you how quickly a golden cage can steal your soul, strip away everything a person loves, and you can mold them into whatever you want. Just to twist the knife, they give her a satellite phone with exactly 3 contacts locked in: Uncle Alejandro, Isabella, and Dante. Because of this, Dante turns into the center of her entire universe. The guy is practically glued to her shadow. She tries to hide in the library, and there he is by the oak doors, slowly taking apart his custom handgun. During those stiff, silent dinners, he is just lurking in the corners, scanning the room for bullets. But here is the scene that really messes with her head. This stone-cold killer actually stops to gently help old Isabella with her arthritic hands. It completely short-circuits Eleanor's brain. The deepest life lesson here is that human beings are never just one thing. Even the worst demons can have a soft touch. Even though he plays the gentle giant with the old lady, Dante keeps Eleanor behind a wall of pure ice. He is just watching her, like a scientist waiting for a glass jar to crack under pressure, and that crack almost happens down in the underground firing range. Alejandro forced her into tactical training, drilling the idea that weakness equals a body bag. The air down there is thick with gunpowder, the sound of live rounds echoing off the concrete walls. Dante leans in, his voice cutting right through her heavy earmuffs, telling her she is flinching before the shot. Finally, her adrenaline just completely crashes. She drops the heavy 9mm pistol, her arms shaking like leaves. It shows us that you can only force someone to be strong for so long before they shatter. Let's hit pause right here, guys, because you and I need to look at the absolute cruelty of this scene. 2 straight hours of brutal conditioning, and Elena's hands are basically raw meat. She's gasping for air, begging to stop, because her arms are shaking too violently to hold the gun. And Dante? He doesn't even blink. He completely rejects her tears, coldly barking at her to pick the weapon back up. When she cries for mercy, he steps right up behind her, pressing his heavy chest against her spine. It sends a physical shockwave that paralyzes her. He forces his rough hands over her bleeding fingers, making her aim again, whispering against her neck that the Greco family doesn't care if she breaks. The harsh truth of life is that the world rarely pauses just because you are exhausted. Picture this dynamic. You have this lethal enforcer, and his warm breath smells marked by subtly of peppermint and black coffee somehow becomes her only anchor in a waking nightmare. Dante doesn't sugarcoat it. He tells her point blank that rival killers are tearing through Brooklyn right now. If they get inside, they will blow her kneecap off and drag her away. The sheer weight of her mortality hits Elena like a train, and she chokes back a sob. Dante instantly shuts it down. He softly orders her to stop crying, treating tears like a luxury they cannot afford. He adjusts her grip, controlling her breathing and trigger finger, while standing like an immovable wall behind her. Sometimes, a harsh reality check is the truest form of care, especially when survival is the only option left. Watch how twisted human nature gets when the walls close in. Her panicked brain actually turns this violent mobster into her safe harbor. She steadies her lungs, pulls the trigger, and destroys the target. Dante gives a low, rumbling grunt of approval, a sound that vibrates down her spine. For 5 agonizing seconds, he doesn't move. He stays wrapped around her, obsessed with the frantic pulse beating against her neck. It is a suffocating tension, built out of adrenaline and the sick reality of a trauma bond. Just when this dark dependency hits its peak, the steel door kicks open. A guy named Leo bursts in, his face shining with the cold sweat of panic. The sad truth is, we cling to whoever is closest when the ship goes down, even the sharks. Leo is shaking, his voice cracking with dread as he announces a total system failure. While their boss, Alejandro, plays businessman at the St. Regis, the compound's local alarms have flatlined. Now, watch Dante flip the switch. He buries that dark attachment they just shared and turns right back into a cold-blooded machine. He shoves away from Elena, draws his gun, and steps directly in front of her like a shield. He aggressively demands the status of the thermal sensors. When Leo admits the hard lines were cut from the inside, Elena's body goes into a state of total, freezing shock. The impenetrable fortress has fallen. This brings us to a bitter piece of wisdom. True destruction rarely kicks down the front door. It almost always holds the keys from the inside. You and I are going to unpack the exact moment the Moretti compound went completely dark. Dante's orders to Leo are surgically precise. He tells him to lock Isabella in the panic room and shoot anyone else who enters. When Leo asks what his plan is, the enforcer's eyes lock onto Elena. He drops that terrifying predatory stare, a silent promise of extreme violence, hiding behind total emptiness. He announces he is taking her to the vaults, promising to butcher anyone who follows. What is chilling here is the dead silence. No blaring sirens or flashing lights. The attackers killed the power, leaving only the sickly green glow of exit signs in the pitch black. It proves a haunting point. Real terror, much like the deepest, never actually announces itself before it strikes. Look at the absolute physical control Dante takes here. He grabs Elelina's arm with a grip guaranteed to leave bruises, yet yes, the only thing keeping her standing. He tells her to step exactly in his footprints, asserting the dominance of a killer. As they navigate the concrete maze, her heart is hammering so hard she is terrified the sound will give them away. The air smells of wet earth and raw fear. Suddenly, a muffled gunshot echoes above, followed by the sickening thud of a body hitting marble. She gasps on instinct, but Dante shuts it down, clamping his hand over her mouth and pinning her to the wall. He scans the dark perfectly calm. It teaches us a brutal lesson. Survival often requires completely silencing your most natural human reactions. They hit the end of the tunnel, stopping before a massive steel vault. Dante's muscle memory takes over, punching in the code and pressing his thumb to the scanner. You hear the heavy clank of the bolts sliding back. It is that agonizing split second where safety is an inch away, but disaster strikes. Heavy boots echo down the hallway. Flashlight beams slice through the darkness, meant to blind them. A voice shouts in rough Italian, marking their position. Dante does flinch. His brain cleanly shifts into combat mode. He shoves Elelina into the vault to keep her breathing, then turns to face the shadows, with his weapon raised. True loyalty isn't about dying together. It is about standing alone in the doorway, so the other person has a chance to live. The hallway turns into a terrifying sensory overload. Muzzle flashes light up the dark like a violent strobe light. The roar of gunfire scrambles Elelina's brain. She covers her ears, curling into a ball as sparks rain down from bullets hitting the steel. Dante is in his element, operating in a state of terrifying flow. He shoots back with the cold precision of a guy who doesn't feel fear, dropping 2 hitmen instantly. As more boots pound down the stairs, Elelina screams his name. Horrified he is going to die for her. Instead of playing the martyr, Dante fires twice and throws his massive frame backward. He slams his shoulder into the door, locking it right as a body thuds against the outside. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is simply know when to close the door and survive. Stick with me, because this is where the dynamic between them permanently shifts. The second those locks click into place, they are plunged into darkness. The aftermath of violence brings a ringing silence, filled only by their ragged breathing and the muffled rage of men outside. Dante's voice breaks the dark, rough and strained, asking if she is hurt. Elelina frantically checks her arms and legs, confirming she is safe before asking him the same thing. Dante switches on a flashlight, pointing it at the ceiling so the room glows without blinding her. It is a surprisingly protective move from a killer. The light reveals their cage, a concrete box filled with stacks of dirty money. A grim reminder that all the wealth in the world cannot buy a way out of a sealed tomb. Dante slumps against the heavy door, his body crashing as his nervous system begs for oxygen. A steady drip of blood runs down his left arm, turning his white shirt into an oily crimson. Elelina spots the wound and rushes over. Dante tries to play it off, clinically muttering that the bullet missed the main artery, while waving her away. He slides down to the freezing floor to stave off shock. His brain is still doing the math, stating the vault can survive a C4 for explosion while they wait for backup. But Elelina completely ignores his tough guy boundaries. She drops to her knees, her shaking hands peeling the ruined fabric away from the deep gash. Empathy is a stubborn thing. Even in the darkest rooms, the human drive to heal will always overpower the primal instinct to hide. Pushing past her shock, Elelina pulls off her sweater, leaving herself shivering in a thin silk camisole. This instantly flips a switch in Dante's brain. His eyes snap open, tracking her bare shoulders as his jaw clenches. His voice drops low with territorial tension. Elelina doesn't back down. As she rips the fabric, she reveals her tragic backstory, how she patched up bruised kids in the foster system. She projects that caregiver instinct onto this lethal enforcer, crawling into his space to tie the tourniquet. His skin radiates heat, proving his heart is pounding, yet Dante suppresses every flinch. He just sits there, totally paralyzed by this unselfish display of care. The beautiful irony here is that true vulnerability always disarms the toughest armor. Dante ignores his bleeding arm and locks his gaze onto her face, watching the tears stream down her cheeks. He points out how badly her hands are shaking before reaching out. When his rough thumb wipes the tear from her cheekbone, it is a massive crossing of boundaries. In the syndicate hierarchy, this touch is a literal death sentence. But inside this sealed vault, the outside world ceases to exist. It strips away all the rules, leaving only raw human connection. Her voice shatters as she admits how terrified she is. Finishing the knot, she leaves her hands pressed flat against his chest. She uses his steady, powerful heartbeat to ground her own spiraling panic. The tragic joke of it all is that the deepest trauma bonds are always forged in the dark, far away from the eyes of the world. Let's hit pause right here and really look at this disaster. Eleanor thought she was safe, right? But Dante just shattered that illusion. He walks her through the set-up thermal sensors, a secure junction box. Total inside job. You can literally see the betrayal punch the air right out of her lungs. Dante leans against that freezing steel wall, his jaw tighter than a vice, and lists the only 3 guys with the keys to the castle. Himself, Alejandro, and then he drops the bomb, Sal. I mean, think about the bitter irony of trust. The people closest to you are the only ones who know exactly where to slip the knife. Eleanor's brain goes into overdrive, frantically rewinding to a syndicate meeting last week, desperately trying to find the red flags she missed. She remembers Sal, the big boss at the southern docks, the exact same guy who warned Alejandro about the hit in the first place. Dante confirms it, his voice just dripping with pure venom. He lays out the whole nightmare math. If Sal is in bed with Lorenzo Greco, the entire Lucchese family is stabbing the Morettis in the back. You see Dante's eyes go wide as the horrifying reality clicks. He ignores the brutal bleeding in his arm and forces himself up. Here is the absolute kicker, the part that just breaks your heart. Alejandro is sitting at a peace summit right now at the St. Regis, a trap set up by Sal himself. Eleanor just stops breathing. It teaches you something brutal about loyalty. Sometimes the hand feeding you is just fattening you up for the slaughter. Look at the sick genius of this trap. You pull the king out of the castle, then you send a hit squad after the vulnerable pawn left behind. Dante is pacing that vault like a caged tiger, his brain moving at 1,000,000 miles an hour. But that heavy steel room means 0 cell service. They are completely cut off. He tells her the hard truth: there are 6 heavy hitters outside waiting to turn them into Swiss cheese. His only job is to keep her breathing, but Eleanor snaps. She flips the script entirely. She screams that if her cousin dies, their whole world burns down. She actually shocks herself with how fierce she sounds. It is funny how life works. We spend years thinking we are weak, right up until the moment we have absolutely nothing left to lose. This is the exact frame where everything changes. The scared little waitress, dead and gone. The fierce Moretti blood just takes over. She actually steps up and jams her finger right into Dante's chest. She stops treating him, grabbed tight, stretches him treat like a bodyguard, and looks at him like what he really is, the deadliest killer in the syndicate. She tells him their king is walking into a slaughterhouse, and she orders him to open that door. Dante just stares at her. The guy is a pure sociopath, but her raw authority stops him cold. Then, this slow, terrifying smile breaks across his face. It is chilling, but also weirdly beautiful. He recognizes the mobster in her. The truth is, you can put on a uniform and serve coffee all you want, but you can never outrun your own blood. He racks the slide on his handgun, chambering around with this dead, mechanical calm. He calls her by her syndicate title, tells her to stay low, and says they are going to kill the rat. Dante presses his thumb to the scanner. Those massive steel bolts slam open. He gives her one last look: do not hesitate. The second that door swings wide, the hallway just erupts into blinding flashes of automatic gunfire. But Dante does not even flinch. He steps right into the meat grinder, 3 shots. 3 dull thuds hitting the concrete. He wipes out the front line of the assault team in the blink of an eye. You watch a guy like that and realize a hard truth about the world. Peace is a luxury, usually paid for by men who are willing to become absolute monsters. Stick with me here, because watching Dante work is like watching a natural disaster. Those tactical helmets do absolutely nothing against his aim. Eleanor is right behind him, her heart beating so hard you can practically hear it through the screen. The air instantly turns thick with gunpowder and the sick, sweet smell of fresh blood. He moves through that hallway like a ghost, shoving her behind his massive shoulders every time they hit a blind corner. They make it to the private garage stairwell, and he suddenly freezes. He presses against the cold wall, signals her to stop. Heavy boots are thumping on the metal stairs right above them. It reminds you that no matter how fast you run from danger, there is always someone waiting for you at the top. Hit pause again. I want you to look at Dante's face right here. He is completely trapped, down to his last 3 bullets, and his jaw is locked tight. He gives Eleanor one simple command: run for the heavy door and do not look back. He is trying to give her a mental lifeline so she does not freeze. Before she can even blink, he whips around and fires up the stairs. One guy drops dead at his feet, but the second mercenary is already waiting. A massive shotgun blast tears the air apart, shredding the concrete wall right next to Dante's head. Sharp pieces of rock slice across his cheek, leaving a bright red streak. It goes to show that you can plan every single move perfectly, but chaos always gets a vote in how your day is going to end. The blast hits Dante so hard he actually stumbles, and his gun hits the floor. The shooter steps out into the harsh light, racking his shotgun and pointing it right at Dante's chest. Time just crawls to an agonizing halt. Eleanor watches Dante fumble for his knife, but his hands are not working fast enough. The shooter is literally pulling the trigger, and this is the part that gets me every time. Eleanor does not scream. The terror just dies in her throat. The innocent girl vanishes forever, and she drops to the floor, grabbing Dante's bloody gun. It is way heavier than she expects. The lesson here is brutal but true. When the universe backs you into a dark enough corner, you will find out exactly what kind of animal you are hiding inside. She brings that heavy pistol up, and her hands are dead steady. No panic, no moral crisis. Her brain just locks onto the memory of Dante teaching her at the firing range. Breathe in, hold, squeeze. She pulls the trigger. The kickback sends a brutal shock right up her arms, but she nails him perfectly. The guy jerks backward and crashes out of sight. The aftermath hits her like a freight train. Her ears are ringing so loud, it drowns out the whole world. She is just glued to the floor, holding a smoking gun, realizing what she just did. She took a life. You know, we all draw lines in the sand about what we would never do, but crossed the street, grabbed his shirt, but protect someone they care about, and they will sprint right past that line without a second thought. The crushing weight of what she just did almost tears her mind apart. The edges of her vision go pitch black, but then Dante is there. He kneels down, completely ignoring the dead body, and wraps his warm hands around hers. He gently pulls the gun away. His eyes are locked onto her with this intense, terrifying obsession. He tells her to look at him. This is exactly how you trap a soul. The monster becomes her only safe place. He wipes the gunpowder off her face and tells her she did what she had to do. He makes the murder sound like an act of love. No shame in surviving, he whispers, pulling her up with a crushing grip. It is a harsh reality to swallow. Sometimes the person pulling you out of the dark is the exact same person dragging you into hell. He does not let her drown in the guilt. He snaps her right out of it, telling her they have to go save her cousin. They burst into the underground garage, and Dante completely ignores the fancy sports cars. He makes a beeline for this massive, armored black beast hiding in the corner. He shoves her inside and starts the engine. It roars like a lion. Without even blinking, he slams the gas and completely obliterates the heavy wooden garage doors. They launch out into a massive rainstorm. The drive to the city is just a blur of neon lights, screaming tires, and pure chaos. It perfectly matches the hurricane going on inside their heads. You realize that sometimes the only way to survive a storm is to hit the gas and become the most dangerous thing on the road. Dante is driving like a maniac, flying across the bridge at 100 miles an hour. His arm is still bleeding through a makeshift bandage, but his face is just a mask of cold, deadly focus. Eleanor watches him in the glowing dashboard light. She sees the sharp cut on his cheek, the blood on his hands. And this is the saddest part of the whole story. She knows he is a stone-cold killer, a total nightmare, but because of what they just went through, she looks at him and thinks, he is my nightmare. Dante finally breaks the silence. He tells her the bitter truth about the St. Regis trap. They booked the private room. We are driving straight into a firing squad. Love is a crazy thing. It will make you ride shotgun into a war zone, just so you do not have to die alone. Then we shoot first, Eleanor says. Her voice does not even shake. Not even a little bit. Listen up, you and I need to pause right here and really look at this. The girl who used to flinch at loud noises is gone. She has officially swallowed the poison of her own family tree. Dante looks at her, and this sick, proud smirk creeps across his face. He knows she crossed the line. They pull up to this gorgeous, old-money hotel that is about to become a very expensive graveyard. Dante rips the car into the alley, slamming the brakes so hard the tires scream. He marches past the terrified kitchen staff, like a wolf walking through a flock of sheep. Life is funny that way. Sometimes the people we run from are the exact people we turn into when our backs are against the wall. Stay low when these doors open. Dante barks, rolling his shoulders to get his blood flowing. He is already running the math in his head, figuring out where the guards are and how to chop the head off the snake before it bites. The elevator chimes. It is a cheerful, polite little sound that feels like a bad joke right before the slaughter. The brass doors symmetrically open. 2 massive guards are standing there, totally clueless. Dante does not even blink. 2 shots. 2 bodies dropping like heavy bags of flour. And here is the truly tragic part. Watch, Eleanor. She steps over these bleeding men without even glancing down at their faces. Her soul is just switched off. It teaches you something grim about reality survival. Rarely leaves you with clean hands, no matter how hard you scrub. Inside that boardroom, the air is so thick you could choke on it. Alejandro is sitting at the head of the table like he owns the universe. His own bodyguards are dead on the floor behind him, but he is perfectly calm. Across from him is Seleucus, a guy whose neck is sweating, with that fake confidence people get right before they die. 4 men have guns pointed right at the boss. Seleucus is whining, blaming Alejandro for the war, begging him to just hand over the girl and step down. It is pathetic. Through all of this, the heart rate of Alejandro probably has not bumped up a single beat. He does not even twitch. It is a harsh truth of the world. The guy who panics first is usually the guy who dies first. And a true apex predator, like Alejandro, literally never panics. Alejandro looks at the traitor with these dead, yellow eyes. He is looking right through him, like the guy is already a ghost. He hits him with cold, hard logic. You think the new boss will let a rat live? He asks. A dog that bites one master will bite the next. They will gut you the second I am in the ground. Seleucus lets out this shaky, nervous laugh because he knows it is true. He opens his mouth to order the execution, but before anyone can pull a trigger, those heavy mahogany doors absolutely explode off their hinges. Dante hits the room like a hurricane of lead and fury. No witty remarks, no warnings, just pure, terrifying speed. The lesson here is simple but brutal loyalty, bought with fear, always expires. But pure violence never hesitates when it is unleashed. Dante drops the first 2 men before they even realize the door is gone. The 3rd guy tries to swing his weapon around, but a shot rings out from the hallway. It is Eleanor. She is standing there, choking on gunsmoke, gripping a stolen pistol so hard her knuckles are white. She blows his shoulder apart, and he goes down screaming. Dante casually puts a bullet right between the eyes of the last man. Let's pause and respect the sheer horror of this. 4 seconds. That is all it took. Seleucus is frozen, his face the color of dirty snow, watching his hired guns bleed out on a very expensive rug. He is staring at a total nightmare, the king, the attack dog, and the brand new monster they just created. The monsters we build always end up being the ones that tear us down. Alejandro pushes back his chair and stands up. He takes his time, fixing his cuffs like he is annoyed by the mess, and grabs a crystal bottle. He pours a drink, the glass clinking in a room that smells like copper and gunpowder. "You missed," he tells the traitor, taking a slow sip. Seleucus drops to his knees, begging, swearing he was forced into it. But Alejandro is not even listening. Tears do not work on a guy who does not have a heart. The boss walks around the table and looks at his daughter. He sees the blood on her clothes. He sees the gun she will not let go of. And the look in his eyes? It is not worry. It is twisted, awful pride. Here is the ugly reality sometimes. The people who claim to love us only love the dark reflections of themselves that they force us to become. "You survived," Alejandro says, giving Dante a sharp look. The enforcer just stares at the crying mess on the floor and mutters that the enemy did not pack enough heat. Alejandro steps right up to the guy who betrayed him. He spells it out. "Nice and slow you tried to kill my blood, and you brought rats into my house." Then, with a sick flair for the dramatic, Alejandro pulls a beautiful pearl-handled revolver from his coat. He whispers a dark goodbye and pulls the trigger. The man drops like a stone, his flashy chains clinking against the floor. Alejandro puts the gun away and steps right up to Eleanor. He reaches out, brushing the silver necklace, resting against her collarbone. It reminds you that the cruel hands can be the most gentle, right before they lock the cage. Alejandro rips her old life away with a few heavy words. "You are no longer a civilian," he tells her. He calls her by her real, bloody name, Sofia Moretti. He promises her that the whole city is going to shake when they hear it. Then he looks at Dante. "You and I can practically feel the silent deal being made right here." Dante steps in, wraps a massive hand around her waist, and pulls her against his chest. He is claiming her, and her father is letting it happen. Eleanor just leans into the warmth of the killer who ruined her life. It is sickening, but it breaks your heart. Because the bitter truth is this: when everything else is burned to ashes, a person will seek comfort from the exact same monster who lit the match, just so they do not have to stand in the dark alone. In that ruined hotel room, the girl we knew is completely dead. She walked into this nightmare as a terrified waitress, hiding from her own shadow. Now, the poison in her veins has taken over. The Mafia Queen is born, and she is standing shoulder to shoulder with the apex predators. She is bound to Dante by trauma, violence, and a twisted kind of loyalty. Together, they are going to burn the city to the ground. It is a tragic victory, and there is a simple, heavy life lesson here for all of us. You can change your name, and you can hide in a quiet town, but you can never truly outrun your shadow. When you bury your demons instead of fighting them, they do not die. They just wait in the dark, getting stronger, until they finally tear their way out and take over completely.
The Moretti family gives Eleanor something she has longed for her whole life: belonging. Isabella S.'s emotional reaction to seeing the locket shows the deep pain of a family that has mourned a lost child for decades. For Isabella, Eleanor is not a stranger. She is a miracle returned from the dead, a living piece of Katerina. This reunion is moving because it shows how powerful family bonds can be, even after years of separation. However, the story also teaches that family can be both protection and burden. The moment Eleanor is recognized as Moretti blood, her old life disappears. Alessandro removes her from the restaurant, moves her into the estate, clears out her apartment, controls her communication, and places her under heavy protection. From his point of view, these actions are necessary because the syndicate wants her dead or captured. But from Eleanor's perspective, feels like losing her freedom overnight. This creates an important educational lesson. Belonging should not erase personal agency. Family can offer love, safety, and identity, but it can also bring expectations, danger, and control. Eleanor's fear is understandable because she did not choose this world. She was pulled into it by blood and history. In real life, people may also feel trapped by family obligations, traditions, reputation, or inherited conflict. The story encourages viewers to think carefully about what healthy family means. As true family should protect without completely silencing the person being protected. Alessandro and Isabella love Eleanor, but they must also learn that she is not only a symbol of the past. She is a person with her own fears, choices, and voice. The lesson is that family should be a home, not a prison. Protection is meaningful only when it leaves room for dignity.